so I'm back with another video. This time I wanted to discuss the issues that I have dealt with memory and all of the difficulties that I can remember, tips and things that I have used to both improve and overcome, compensate for the losses, the issues that I have around it. Initially, when I came home from the hospital, my working memory, what I now know to be my working memory, was so short, it was like literally seconds. I could try to read something, and by the time I got to the end of a sentence, I would have forgotten the beginning of the sentence. It didn't even matter how long the sentence was. It was just that quick. So I started taking a slip of paper and putting it right below the line that I was on at the time, and visually setting for myself, using that paper as a guide, the beginning of the sentence, looking for the punctuation before I started reading, and placing that slip of paper right below the end of the sentence. And I would reread that sentence until I felt as if I got it, and then move on to the next sentence. What I discovered was happening initially when I was trying to read is something that kind of happens to everyone. I think everyone kind of gets lost sometimes while they're trying to read something, and they'll end up thinking to themselves, wait a second, what's going on here? I have no idea what I've just read. And they have to go back. The problem when you have memory issues is that you don't know where you were, so you don't know where to go back to. So the paper was my solution, the little slip of paper that I would move down. Very similarly to when I was a child, you could buy sets at the store with a book when you're learning to read. You could buy a set at the store with a book and a cassette tape that you could put into your cassette player, and you would listen to the cassette while you read the book, and in the book there would be little markings that told you what the end of the certain section or a certain sentence was, and then on the cassette there would be like a little bell or a little buzz or some type of audible notification so that you could keep yourself on track of where you were. Well, this was very similar. My working memory was so short that it would be words, literally 5 words, 2 words, 3 words, and I would already have forgotten what was happening at the beginning of the sentence. And it was so maddening and frustrating when I would sit down at the end of the day and realize I haven't even read an entire paragraph of this. So I devised that system thinking back to when I was a child and the tools that we had available to us for learning how to read in the first place. And I started using this slip of paper and started visually finding the beginning of a sentence, finding the end of a sentence, and saying to myself, I am going to read this sentence by sentence, and continuing to reread that one sentence until I genuinely felt as if I had gotten it. And then I would slide the slip of paper down to the next sentence and do the same thing. It took a lot longer than it normally takes me to read. I'm a pretty fast reader, but I was able to get through a page a day, whereas when I first came home from the hospital, I would be so lost, I would reread the same page for 3 or 4 days in a row because I had no idea what was going on and I couldn't remember. And my working memory was so short that the beginning of a sentence would be gone from my working memory by the time I got halfway through the sentence. And my short-term memory was so bad that I couldn't even remember which sentence I was on or where I was in the story. So I use those techniques to visually locate myself. Your working memory is the very, very short-term memory. Like a lot of times we only think of it as short-term memory versus long-term memory, but you also have your working memory, which is the shortest term memory, which is the memory that you're using right now to accomplish the task that you are engaged in, which you are currently engaged. So once I figured that out for just reading, not reading and doing tasks at the same time, but just reading, I was able to begin to notice some changes and some improvements to the length of my working memory. Then, because I'm a knitter and I knit and I crochet, and I often use patterns, and I have to read them. So I was trying to do that because it's something that it's a lifelong thing. So I'm like, I have to do this because this is what I do. And I couldn't do it, right? I couldn't read the instruction and look back to my work and do the instruction and then go back to my pattern and read the next instruction and do the work. Every time I moved my eyes from the pattern itself to the work, I would completely lose what was going on. So I began to use that same system with knitting and crochet patterns where I would slide the piece of paper down, try to find that one block of instruction that I needed to do right at that second, and look back to my work, do it, and then come back to the pattern. And again, it was maddening. It was maddening because it took so long to do something that I've been doing since I was 8 years old. At that time, I'm 34. I'm 8 years old when I started knitting in the first place. So I had been doing this for the better part of my life, but for some reason, I could not translate from, I would forget the instructions between the pattern itself and the work. Even if I had the pattern like right here, it's that just milliseconds of time between, I would forget and have to go back and reread and reread. So everything took a really long time, but I did begin to have some success and finish some projects and get some things done. Get entire pages read of magazines or books or whatever I happened to be reading, and to feel at the end of the day as if I had actually accomplished something. And as I managed to do that over time, and it took a while, it took quite some time, it got better and it got longer and it got to where it flowed much better and just worked better. So these days, 15 years later, I still have days where it doesn't seem like it works at all. But for the most part, I am able to look at a pattern, go to my work, follow the pattern, and go back without too many glitches. The same thing would go for if you're cooking, if you're trying to follow a recipe, the instructions on a box. There are just so many times when, as just a human being, we need that simple skill. And when you have a severe problem with your memory, you can't do the simplest of tasks. You can't read the instructions you're going to have a hard time making a box of, macaroni and cheese. You're going to have a hard time putting a TV dinner in the microwave. So those were some things that didn't have to do with technology necessarily, but then of course along came, because this was in 2006 when my injury happened, so e-readers weren't that big of a thing. You know what I mean? They were very expensive, and I didn't have one. I just used regular books. I still do to this day, but you know what I mean? I own an e-reader now. And so now what I would recommend if you're doing an e-reader, if you're able to use an e-reader, first of all, set your screen shut off time long. Make it as long as you can. It's going to reduce your battery life, but make it as long as you possibly can so that you don't have the frustration of it shutting off while you're trying to do this process, because this process can take a long time. And then highlight the section that you're trying to work on, whether you're trying to read a book, or you're trying to read an article, or you're trying to follow a recipe, or you're trying to do a crochet or a knitting pattern. Highlight the section that you're working on. Give yourself some time, give yourself some patience, and allow yourself to make some mistakes. And you will find, I believe that you will find, that after some time, it will improve. I understand that likely it's never going to go away completely, and that's something that I'm struggling against myself, that I'm trying to work on having a better viewpoint on and attitude toward. But at the very least, at the end of the day, if you can successfully, you the patient, can successfully put your meal into the microwave and prepare it for yourself, having been able to follow the instructions properly and get it out and sit down and eat it, you will probably feel emotionally a lot better. And as you do it, your brain will also heal, and some of those neural pathways will hopefully come back together and come back in order and work better for you the next time. So that's short-term memory, working memory. There will be more of these. That's why this is part 1. But again, as always, if you feel like this information is helpful to you or to anyone else, please feel free to like, to share any comments or questions, anything that you would like me to cover. I will make another video later. I thank you very much for watching, and Happy New Year.